The 1995 movie Casino dramatized an era in Las Vegas history during which organized crime had hidden ownership and control over several of the Sin City casinos. Although organized crime families from across the country had business interests in Las Vegas, the dominant group hailed from Chicago and was called the Outfit. In the movie Casino, actor Joe Pesci plays Nicky Santoro, a character based on real-life Chicago outfit enforcer Tony Spilotro. Tony Spilotro was born in Chicago on May 19, 1938. In school, he developed a reputation as a tough kid, bullying and intimidating classmates and teachers alike. Several of his fellow students said he exhibited the little man's syndrome. After being thrown out of school, he took to the streets and began his life of crime as a thief and tough guy. The film's Ace Rothstein is played by Robert De Niro and depicts master sports handicapper Frank Lefty Rosenthal. Lefty Rosenthal was born in Chicago in 1929. He was a natural when it came to formulating betting lines on sporting events. As the years passed, he gained a reputation as one of the premier handicappers in the country and was a top earner for Chicago Outfit's illegal gambling operations. In 1966, after spending some time in Florida, Lefty relocated to the booming gaming city in the desert, Las Vegas. Not long after his arrival in 1967, he bought into the Rose Bowl sportsbook and later moved on to the Strip and the mob-controlled Stardust. De Niro's wife, Ginger, is played by Sharon Stone and based on the real-life Jerry McGee. A native of California, Jerry moved to Las Vegas in the late 1950s. She worked as a topless showgirl at the Tropicana and Dunes and as a cocktail waitress and hustler around the casinos. When Lefty met her in 1968, it was love at first sight, at least on his part. He was in a hurry to tie the knot, but Jerry had reservations about settling down. Her concerns faded when Lefty placed a hefty stash of cash and jewelry in a safe deposit box for her to keep if the marriage didn't work out. The two were wed the following year. The character Frankie, played by Frank Vincent, is based on Frank Cullotta. Frank was born in Chicago in December of 1938. As a young tough on the streets of the Windy City, he met and became friends with Tony Spilotro. He subsequently joined Tony in Vegas and organized and ran Spilotro's crew of thieves, arsonists, and killers known as the Hole-in-the-Wall Gang. He turned government witness in 1982. His defection was instrumental in ending the outfit's control over Las Vegas casinos and street crimes. He returned to Vegas in 1995 and served as a technical consultant to the movie Casino and appeared in several scenes as a hitman. The mob-run casino in the movie is called the Tangiers. In real life, the headquarters for the outfit was at the Stardust. When Tony Spilotro was 18, his actions caught the attention of mob-connected bookmaker Mad Sam DiStefano. The bookie was known to be totally ruthless when dealing with anyone who crossed him. Mad Sam preferred to use an ice pick on his victims, but wasn't above slicing, shooting, or incinerating them, depending on his mood. Liking what he saw in Tony, Sam offered him a job as a collector and to provide muscle as necessary. Tony accepted and embarked on the road to becoming a made man in the outfit and one of its most feared enforcers. The 1962 Eminem murders, the head in the Vice scene in the movie, led to Tony becoming a made man. While Tony Spilotro was plying his trade in Chicago, Lefty was rising to the top in Las Vegas. But along with his increased power came problems. The Gaming Control Board said Lefty was required to have a gaming license to hold a management position in the casino, and Rosenthal's known associations with organized crime figures disqualified him from getting a license. However, there was a loophole. To allow entertainers with suspected links to mobsters to perform in the casinos, they were exempt from the license requirement. Latching onto that exemption, Lefty named himself the Stardust Entertainment Director and started his own variety show. As Rosenthal waged his battle with the regulators to keep his job at the Stardust, the outfit decided to expand operations. Using a frontman with no criminal record or associates, they obtained a Teamster pension fund loan of $67 million to add the Hacienda, Marina, and Fremont casinos to their holdings. The straw man was Alan R. Glick. Born in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania in 1942, Glick served in the military as a helicopter pilot during the war in Vietnam and later turned up in the San Diego area as a land developer. In early 1974, Glick formed the Argent Corporation and obtained the Teamster loan to purchase the Stardust and the other 3 casinos. During Glick's tenure, Argent obtained approximately $146 million in Teamster money. On paper, Glick showed as the boss of casino operations, but the real power belonged to Lefty Rosenthal. In 1971, the Chicago bosses sent Tony to Las Vegas to keep an eye on the skim being operated out of the Stardust. His presence would serve as a deterrent to interlopers from other organized crime families wanting a piece of the action, as well as discouraging internal theft. He would also deal with any others who posed a threat to the outfit's interests. After arriving in town, Tony and his wife Nancy quickly adapted to the Vegas scene. They made it a point to hang out in the right places and with the right people. However, Tony was an ambitious guy and wasn't satisfied with just hanging around, waiting for Rosenthal to need assistance with problems at the casinos. Recognizing there were other criminal opportunities available in his new hometown, Tony soon became involved with loan sharking, robbery, burglary, and arson for hire. It wasn't long before he was recognized as the top mobster in Las Vegas. Nothing happened in Sin City's underworld without Tony's knowledge and approval. Other crooks wanting to do business in Vegas had to pay him a monetary tribute known as a street tax. Many locals referred to Tony as the King of the Strip. As Tony's stature grew, he brought in other heavies from Chicago to give him a hand. Among them were his brother John and Herb Fat Herbie Blitzstein. Another was Tony's childhood pal Frank Cullotta. Frank's first assignment was to form a crew of thieves, arsonists, and killers to do Tony's bidding. Cullotta did a first-rate job in putting together what would become known as the Hole-in-the-Wall Gang. They earned their name by their method of burglarizing buildings by making a hole in the wall or roof in order to bypass alarmed doors and windows. The gang, shown here after a 1981 arrest, consisted of Ernie DeVino, a highly competent thief who was living in Las Vegas. He was also willing to use muscle as necessary. Next is Larry Newman, a sadistic killer Cullotta had met while doing time in Stateville Prison in Illinois. Nicknamed Lurch because of his size, Newman was well off financially due to a trust fund his father had left him. He chose a life of crime because he liked it, not out of necessity. Wayne Matecki was a Chicago boy who looked more like a computer nerd than a professional criminal. But his looks were deceiving. In addition to stealing, Matecki participated in multiple murders. He never lived in Las Vegas and came to town only when his talents were needed for a specific job. Leo Guardino was an expert thief from Chicago living in Las Vegas. Leo shunned violence and had a rather comical hang-up when on a burglary. He didn't like to feel the victim's eyes were watching him rob them, so he overturned any family photos. He also had a rather unique talent. He could communicate with dogs. If a dog were present in the building, Leo would talk with it and keep it calm. Joe Blasco. In 1978, the Metro detective was caught on FBI wiretaps passing information to Spilotro and was fired. He then openly went to work for Tony. However, he was not a regular member of Cullotta's crew. In fact, Cullotta didn't like or trust him. But when a high-potential score was planned, Tony wanted the former cop included as a counter-surveillance man. And, of course, there was Frank Cullotta himself. There were also some major players on the law's side. Charlie Parsons was the supervisor of the organized crime unit of the FBI's Las Vegas field office, and Emmett Michaels was the electronics expert. Lynn Farron was the Las Vegas case agent for the Straw Man, also known as the Skimming investigations, and Dennis Arnoldy was the case agent investigating Spilotro's street crimes. Las Vegas Metro was headed by Sheriff John McCarthy during the height of the law's battle against the Spilotro gang from 1979 to 1983. McCarthy appointed Kent Clifford to run Metro's Intelligence Bureau. Clifford developed the strategy that Metro employed against the gangsters. Gene Smith worked for Kent Clifford in the Intelligence Bureau. He was tough and aggressive in his investigations of the Spilotro gang. As the law increased the pressure on the bad guys, they found a potential witness who might be able to provide crucial information against Tony Spilotro and Frank Cullotta. Sherwin Jerry Listener was a crook and con artist living in Vegas. Although not a member of Tony's crew, Listener hung out in some of the same places they did and had once recruited Frank Cullotta in an unsuccessful money laundering scam. In July 1979, Listener was arrested by the feds on stolen property charges and faced an October trial. In an attempt to get a deal for himself, he agreed to testify before a federal grand jury. That news got back to Tony and Frank. As you can imagine, that didn't bode well for Listener. Frank Cullotta and Wayne Matecki paid the informant a visit on October 10th, killing him in his own house and dumping his body into the swimming pool. There were three major turning points in the law's war with Spilotro. The first was the Listener killing. Because Listener was a federal witness at the time of his death, the feds were able to investigate the murder. The second event took place on July 4, 1981, at an upscale business called Bertha's Gifts and Home Furnishings, located at 896 East Sahara. Today that building houses a jewelry store, but other than that, it looks pretty much the same as it did when the Hole in the Wall gang broke through its roof above the vault, anticipating a $1 million score in cash and jewelry. The burglars that went up on the roof that night were Leo Guardino, Wayne Matecki, and Ernie Davino. They carried power and hand tools with them as well as acetylene torches. They plugged their power tools into electric receptacles located in the roof-mounted air conditioning units. While those three were breaking in, Cullotta and Newman patrolled the area in their cars looking for anything suspicious. Joe Blasco was stationed in a van in the parking lot of a shopping center across the street. He monitored police scanners and maintained contact with the burglars on the roof, Cullotta and Newman, using CB radios. However, there was another man riding with Newman that night. A Chicago burglar and alarm expert named Sal Romano had been invited along on the job by Ernie DeVino. Cullotta didn't like or trust Romano. When he heard what DeVino had done, he went to Tony and tried to cancel the burglary. Tony said Frank was just being paranoid and it was too late to cancel. He said to put Romano with Newman, and if anything went wrong, Newman would kill Romano on the spot. It turned out that Frank was right. Romano was an FBI informant, and the thieves were walking into a law enforcement trap. A team of 2 agents and 2 Metro officers were assigned to arrest the crooks on the roof. Another 25 or so officers and agents were tasked with capturing Cullotta and Newman and getting Romano out of the area and into witness protection. When Leo Guardino dropped through the roof of Bertha's at approximately 10:40 p.m., the act of burglary was complete and the lawmen went into action. All members of the gang were taken into custody and Romano was whisked away to safety. His involvement in the caper wasn't made public until years later. The burglars were all booked into the Clark County Jail. They're shown here sitting in a courtroom awaiting arraignment. These arrests were important not only because of the strength of the law's case, but because a rift that had been developing between Tony and Frank came to the surface and contributed to the third turning point, Frank Cullotta rolling and becoming a government witness in 1982. But Frank, Tony, and their colleagues weren't the only people whose lives had turned upside down. Lefty Rosenthal had problems of his own. His wife Jerry had become dependent on alcohol and drugs and admitted to having an affair with Tony Spilotro. The couple had split and Jerry left Vegas for California after cleaning out the safety deposit boxes loaded with cash and jewelry. Lefty had also fallen out of favor with some of the Midwest crime bosses. There was even some concern that he might follow in Cullotta's footsteps and cooperate with the law. In the odds maker's world, those weren't good things. On the evening of October 4th, 1982, Lefty Rosenthal left Tony Roma's restaurant on East Sahara. He got into his Cadillac and turned the key in the ignition. In the past, this action had always resulted in the Caddy's engine coming to life and settling into a smooth purr. Things were a bit different this time, however. A charge of C4 explosive had been placed under the trunk next to the gas tank and wired to the ignition. When Lefty turned the key, the bomb ignited. Had he been in any other car, the gambler would no doubt have been killed instantly. But the Caddy was built with a steel plate under the driver's seat as standard equipment. The steel barrier diverted the blast toward the passenger side of the vehicle and gave Lefty a chance to jump out of the car before the interior became fully engulfed. The gas tank exploded seconds later, sending the car's roof 60 feet into the air. The lucky Lefty escaped the inferno with only some singed clothes and minor injuries. He was alive, but someone had sent a strong message. Not long after the bombing, the gambler departed Las Vegas for California and eventually Florida. Like so many of the killings and attempted killings in the realm of the mobsters, no one was ever charged in the attack. Lefty Rosenthal passed away from natural causes at his Florida home on October 13, 2008. Just over a month after her ex-husband narrowly escaped death, Jerry Rosenthal's life ended in California. On November 6th, she stumbled into a seedy Sunset Boulevard motel and started screaming, then fell unconscious to the floor. She was transported to a hospital, but died 3 days later without coming out of her coma. The coroner ruled her death was the result of an accidental drug overdose. The cash and jewelry she had left Las Vegas with were never found, apparently having been spent, stolen, or both. Jerry was interred in Mount Sinai Memorial Park in Los Angeles, California. Although Jerry's troubles were over, Tony Spilotro's were mounting. A number of unresolved cases and new arrests made Tony and his attorney and future Las Vegas Mayor Oscar Goodman regular visitors to the courtroom. But other forces intervened before the law could finally bring Tony Spilotro to justice. In June 1986, Tony was lured back to Chicago to attend the ceremony for his brother Michael to become a made man. Tony knew he was on thin ice with the outfit bosses, who weren't happy about the way he had conducted himself in Las Vegas. He was seen by some to be a prime candidate to switch sides in order to get out from under the mountain of legal cases pending against him. Although he sensed danger, blood was thicker than water, so Tony made the trip. The brothers were last seen when they departed Michael's Oak Park home on June 14th. Michael's wife, Ann, reported the men missing on June 16th. On June 24th, an Associated Press story reported that an Indiana farmer had discovered two badly beaten bodies in a shallow grave in his cornfield. The bodies were identified as those of Anthony and Michael Spilotro. An Indiana State Police spokesman said the bodies, clad only in underwear, were buried one on top of the other in a 5-foot grave. An examination of the bodies by a forensic pathologist indicated blunt force injuries, probably caused by hands or feet, resulted in the deaths. They'd been beaten senseless, and there was some evidence that they may have been put in the ground while they were still breathing. In the movie, the Spilotros were disposed of by being beaten to death and buried in a cornfield. The person shown in the grave in this photo isn't Joe Pesci. It's actually an electrician who worked on the set named Tim Redsel. Tony had suffered a broken rib during the all-day shooting of the beating scene, and his regular stuntman was too thin to appear in the scene without a shirt. Tim was very similar in size to Pesci and was recruited to go in the hole. This is a photo of the actual grave after it was processed as a crime scene. Tony's remains were interred in the Queen of Heaven Cemetery in Cook County, Illinois. In what was a surprise to many mob watchers, on April 25, 2005, an FBI-led investigation dubbed Operation Family Secrets resulted in federal indictments charging 14 reputed members and associates of Chicago organized crime with running a decades-old criminal enterprise that was responsible for committing 18 murders. The slayings included those of Tony and Michael Spilotro. During the subsequent trial, it was learned that the Spilotros had actually been beaten in the basement of a home in a Chicago suburb and their bodies transported to the cornfield for burial. It just so happened that the grave was about 5 miles from a farm owned by former outfit boss Joey Aiuppa. In closing, these are some of the men that held positions of power in the outfit over the years. The legendary Al Capone, Tony Joe Batters Accardo, who was Chicago's organized crime boss from 1943 through 1955. Early in his criminal career, he served as a driver and bodyguard for Capone. According to many Chicago organized crime watchers, Accardo remained the behind-the-scenes brains of the outfit even after stepping down from the top post. He died of natural causes on May 17, 1992. Sam Momo Giancana was the outfit boss from 1955 through 1966. He was allegedly instrumental in putting Illinois in John Kennedy's column in the 1960 election, and some believe he was involved in Kennedy's assassination 3 years later. Giancana was murdered in his Oak Park, Illinois home on June 19, 1975. Although no one was ever charged in the killing, Tony Spilotro was one of the suspects. Joe Doves Aiuppa took the reins in 1971 with the backing of Tony Accardo. In 1985, he was convicted of skimming money from Las Vegas casinos and received sentences totaling 28.5 years. He died in prison in February 1997. Joseph Ferriola held the top spot in Chicago mobdom from 1986 to 1989, when he died of natural causes. He was in charge when the Spilotro brothers were killed. Joey the Clown Lombardo was among those named and convicted in the Family Secrets trial. Lombardo was one of Tony's superiors during Spilotro's Las Vegas years and was considered to have been a friend of the Spilotro family. However, friend or not, Lombardo would have to have signed off on the Spilotro murders.